It is time for the Writer's Block, our weekly look at sports, and this week it's all football. I'm Jenni Carlson here in the studios of the Oklahoman, joined by Cedric Golden in the studios of the Austin American-Statesman. Hello, dear friend.
What's up, J. Carr?
It's November. I guess I should figure we're going to talk football, but it's wall to wall. We're going to start with the college football playoff. The rankings are out again. The initial rankings, Cedric, I felt like the Big 12 was in pretty good shape. A team like Oklahoma State with 3 losses gets into the top 25, and you think, hey, this might work out for the Big 12. But now we see Baylor slipping 13th. They're the lowest undefeated team in the rankings. It seems like the Big 12 is really kind of teetering on either in trouble or completely, sort of on the outskirts of the conversation. Obviously, a lot still to play out, but this feels like the Big 12 is in a bit of trouble here.
Well, to steal a line from the old 50s song, it's not the Big 12's party, and they can't cry if they want to. Big 12's not going to be involved in this mix, Jen. I can tell you that now. They just aren't going to be involved. OU losing to K-State closed the deal on that. The Big 12 champion will play in a nice bowl game, but it won't be a CFP game, Jen.
Yeah, and it just feels like, analysts looking at this, you just see a lot of hurdles between any Big 12 teams getting in. Obviously, there's going to be some teams that are going to beat each other between, say, Oklahoma and those top 4 spots, Baylor in those top 4 spots. But at this point, Cedric, if you think about it, Oklahoma, Baylor, probably the marquee matchup of the weekend. ESPN Game Day going to be there. So clearly a game that, a lot of people feel like is worth watching. But, if Baylor wins, they've beaten the top 10 team, but now they've beaten a team with 2 losses. Oklahoma not undefeated. If Oklahoma wins, they've beaten a top 15 team, but not a top 10 team. It feels like, even as these Big 12 teams are beating each other, you're just not having the bump like you're seeing with SEC teams or Big 10 teams beating each other. Just not the respect there to bump these teams up into a spot where they need to be to get into the playoff.
And if you think about it, Jen, if Oklahoma were to lose to Baylor on Saturday and then lose to them again in Jerry World, if Baylor runs the table, that's an interesting concept. But their weak schedule at the beginning of the season will probably bite them in the butt. I don't know that Baylor's going to run the table. I don't think they're going to beat OU in Waco. So I just believe that the Big 12, OU losing to K-State killed the Big 12. Texas not being very good didn't help OU's cause. No. If OU beats K-State and Texas is a 1 or 2 loss team instead of a 3 loss team, maybe OU's up there in 4th or 5th, tied with Georgia and Bama. But here's what I know. LSU just conquered their biggest hurdle. They whooped Alabama like they stole something. So LSU's going to get in. Ohio State is the best team in college football, in my opinion, the most complete team. And Chase Young will be back, the defensive end, who's on a suspension. Clemson has a very weak schedule. The ACC is crap this year. So Clemson's going to get in. Then you got that 4th spot. You got 9-0 Minnesota. You got Bama. You got Oregon. You got Utah. That 4th spot, I hate to say it, is if that goes to Alabama, I'm just going to have to call for an investigation. I don't want Alabama in there this year. I'm sorry. And Georgia lost to South Carolina, which lost to App State. So come on. Yeah. So Georgia has no business in that thing either.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Pretty clearly to me, the committee is, yes, losses are, a black mark against you. But to me, it's pretty clearly who you've beat. Have you beat enough quality opponents? Have you beat top 10 teams? Have you beaten top 20 teams? Those are really the questions that the committee is leaning heavily on. And, Cedric, you mentioned it. Baylor having a bad non-conference run. And truthfully, when you look at these conferences, yes, there's some teams within the Big 12 hurting each other. But the thing that keeps biting the Big 12 is, A, either, lackluster schedules in the non-conference, or B, not beating those marquee teams in your non-conference. I mean, you mentioned Texas, Cedric, and I don't want to put it all on Texas, but it looked vastly different if Texas had beat LSU. There's some other teams that had some opportunities to win marquee non-conference games and didn't. Right now, the Big 12's really their best non-conference win is K-State over Mississippi State, and Mississippi State is nowhere in the conversation in the SEC. The Big 12 has to beat those non-conference marquee teams when they get the chance, and they just haven't done it. Not this year, and really not over the last few years.
No, they haven't. OU carries that banner, and we remember when Texas beat Notre Dame here in Austin, and I think it was Joe Tessitore said Texas was back, and they were back to the tune of 5-7. So we didn't know that Notre Dame was horrible back then. So they've won a couple of marquee games. OU always plays a good non-conference schedule and holds its own in those games. But the Big 12, Texas was its big chance. Texas knocks off LSU in week 2. Then we're talking, Jen.
Yeah.
And maybe Texas is more confident. Maybe that gives them the confidence to go in and win in Dallas, but it didn't. What you see is a 6-3 team that's nowhere near the rankings, and teams like OU are suffering as a result. Yep. A win over Texas is not a big deal this year in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's been entertaining, or at least for me, Cedric, to watch as these different Big 12 teams have beat each other, and to see Baylor emerge. It's only been 2 years since they won one game in Matt Rule's first season in Waco, so their turnaround has been dramatic. There's been so many close games. There's been overtime games. We saw the nail biter between Oklahoma and Iowa State. I mean, we've been entertained by the Big 12. But at the same time, it hasn't helped their playoff hopes in the least. So I think that this latest ranking really bodes poorly for the Big 12. Even if you do have a Baylor win out or an Oklahoma win out, I just don't see how it's going to happen. It feels very, very hard, the road between where they are now and one of those top 4 spots.